Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Esben, the co-founder of Cobalt and Userflow. Esben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, and you have an amazing story because you have built one company in kind of VC package way. Now you are building another company in a much more bootstrapping way. You also led the first company, Cobalt, in a sales-led growth model, and now with a product-led growth model with Userflow. But better than me, why don't you introduce yourself to the community out there?
Yeah, I think you did a good start. So I'm, as you mentioned, I founded a company called Cobalt. We founded that back in 2013, which is basically a cybersecurity company, but software driven. So you have we do something called pen test as a service, which is basically penetration testing, but delivered via a modern software platform. But it's still with actual humans testing your platform. And that was quite successful. We grew that. It's a Series B company today with more than 300 employees. Awesome. I decided, however, to leave that operationally approximately 2 years ago. I think I'm kind of like a founder by heart, maybe more, and I like those early stages. And that's why I decided to kind of start from scratch and do another startup. And that's when I co-founded Userflow together with my co-founder Sebastian. And Userflow is basically a software as a service company where you can build no-code onboarding. So you can basically build onboarding as a layer on top of your own software.
Got it.
And Userflow is, as you mentioned, very different. We've been around now. My co-founder started a bit before me, so we've been around for 3 years, but we're still only 3 employees. We're bootstrapped, but yeah, still the business is doing really, really well. We just wanted to do it different this time.
And with Userflow, you already have gone from 0 to 1 with just 3 team members.
Yeah, actually, beyond
2 of them founders.
Yeah, beyond $1 million in ARR, we are way above that. So yeah, it's going really, really well. We have 550 plus customers today, and yeah, everything's going well.
In terms of roots, I know that you are based in the Valley in San Francisco, but you also have Danish roots. I've worked with a couple of Danish companies. I like the Danish roots and Danish culture of also a lot of experience going from Denmark into the US directly over there. Any comments about that?
No, I think both Cobalt I started together with 3 other Danish guys, and then Userflow is also with a Danish co-founder. So you can say it's Danish rooted, but it's both companies were started in the US and incorporated in the US. My co-founder now in Userflow moved back to Copenhagen, but I'm still in San Francisco. So yeah, I think with Cobalt it was a bigger challenge because we were 4 guys coming from Denmark. We didn't know anybody in the Valley. We had to kind of start from the very scratch. But back then, 10 years ago, it was the way to go, right? If you wanted to raise capital, if you wanted to build a tech business, that was the place to be. Today, I think that has changed a lot. The tech world is much more global today. It's much easier to raise money and build a global business from anywhere in the world, basically.
Just a second curiosity before we go into the nitty-gritty of the bootstrapping versus VC game, product-led growth versus sales-led growth is kind of the time zone difference, right? So typically the general advice is start with the East Coast, because for Denmark, you would have a 6-hour difference, and to Silicon Valley, you have a 9-hour difference. From the ones in the UK and Portugal, like myself, it's a little bit easier, but still 5 and 8 respectively. But anyway, any comments there why you move into the West Coast directly instead of considering the East Coast? I'm sure that some founders that are also considering this that listen to the podcast, and it might be useful for them.
Yeah, I think back 10 years ago with Cobalt, it was because that's where the tech was, right? You didn't have these hubs in other places. You might have had a few tech companies in Boston and so on, right? New York, but it wasn't like a big community like it was in Silicon Valley. And it was just a place to go to, as I said, raise capital, be in the tech community, and it was super exciting. I think, as mentioned, this has changed now, so you can basically be placed wherever in the world you want to be. I think, yes, you should consider like geographically putting you in a place where you can give the best support to your customer base, and maybe that is East Coast. We're lucky in Userflow, we have kind of people in Europe, and then we have me on the West Coast, right? So we can cover everything from Australia to US to Europe. With that team, and that's similar to what we had in Cobalt. We had a team in Europe, we had a team, and we ended up having East Coast office in Boston, and we started in Silicon Valley, right? So yeah, that distribution can mean a lot, but I think if you go product led, it means less, because then you don't have to build teams around doing a lot of meetings. Product-led growth is a lot about reducing the need to have customer meetings, reducing the need to have sales meetings.
Good point.
And in that way, you can basically be placed wherever you want.
And maybe we can go into this direction. If you want, we can kind of change the order of talking about bootstrapping versus the VC game. Sure. And let's go directly into product-led growth versus sales-led growth, how you built Cobalt and how you are building Userflow with a different lens or a different go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, so maybe for those who are not so familiar with the two models, I think for me, product-led growth is really can be defined in two ways. One is it's a cultural mindset in your business where you always think product first in everything you do, right? So every time you need to solve a problem, instead of solving it with people, you think about how could we solve this directly in the product. So if you have a support issue that's recurring, you don't hire more support people. No, you fix the actual root cause in the product. If you spend a lot of time on procurement, you figure out how can we make that more streamlined in the product. So those are like just example, but it's basically like a company-wide culture where you always think product first. So it's everything in marketing, sales, customer success, and not only the product team. So that's one way of looking at it. The other good way of looking at it is to compare it to its counterpart, sales-led growth. So in sales-led growth, which has been the most popular model in software as a service over the last 20 years, it has been that you go to a website, you request a demo, you get routed to maybe a BDR who routes you to an AE, you have a demo, you then discuss back and forth, you might have more meetings, you kind of evaluate, and then you decide on buying. And when you decide on buying, you get onboarded by a customer success manager, and then you get to use the product. Where in product-led growth, you are kind of doing the opposite and simplifying. So you're basically allowing users to have access to your product from the beginning through a free trial or freemium. And that you convert ideally the customers without them speaking with anybody, but you can have like sales assist. And then they basically buy themselves via the product. They get onboarded via the product, and ideally you also expand and retain them via the product. But as I mentioned, product-led doesn't need to exclude people, but they just become more of a nice to have than a need to have. So you're kind of shifting it around. So at Cobalt, I think we actually started out as a product-led company. We were very much free trial, self-sign up, because when you start out, that's kind of how you think about software business. I think what we realized at Cobalt was, so we were doing penetration testing, and that was a market dominated by consultancies who by nature does a lot of high touch. And so that was what the customer were used to, that they get a lot of high touch, everything explained, get to meet the pen testers. So we were already changing the market a lot by making it platform driven, software driven, introducing this whole new model of doing pen testing. So there was a lot of education to be made, and we were up against the high touch service industry. So I think at that point in time, we just realized to compete with the consultancies, we needed to be a bit more high touch and to educate the market. And that's why we decided to move more in a sales-led direction. But then actually, after like 7-8 years, we kind of realized now we're too sales-led, right? Now we need to become a bit more product-led because now the market has matured. We are less competing against, we're still, Cobalt is still competing against consultancies, but there are also new platforms coming and stuff like that. And people have gotten much more used to software as a service and these kind of software-driven approaches. So now was the time to really see, can we move some of our customers to do more self-service, product-led, especially the smaller customers, but also the larger ones. And that's a journey we then embarked on in Cobalt, actually, to transition more of the business to be more product-led instead of sales-led. And that was a super fun journey that also sparked my interest in the space and a big reason for why I decided to do Userflow.
And it happens a lot when a company that is kind of considered successful after Series A and through Series B, Series C, and start facing some growth plateaus. It becomes too expensive, and sometimes we even have a huge number of salespeople, and we are not able to accelerate sales and to increase sales. Sometimes it even happens the opposite, is we have more people and we are able to sell less, or the marginal increase in terms of the output is not proportional to the amount of headcount that we add into the company. So it shows that sometimes even the unit economics stop working, and it's kind of a nightmare in terms of scaling up. So that's why then we start considering other ways of making it work, and it comes to mind, how can we become more product-led growth? I imagine that it's super different to start already with that mindset, with a product-led growth mindset, but doing this conversion from a sales-led growth into a product-led growth is not easy at all. Any advice for the folks out there that are scaling up, that might be considering our system or our methodology of sales is not working anymore, or it's not being productive, the unit economics don't work, maybe we should consider to be a little bit more product-led growth oriented? How do we do that, and what are the challenges that we face it?
Yeah, no, very good question. I think so. Yeah, the unit economics, I agree. You reach a growth plateau and you want to see, can you do new avenues? But it's also about being cost efficient, right? Like how much are you actually spending on growing, right?
Good point. Yeah.
Where in a sales-led model, you spend a lot, right? You tend to spend a lot of money on growth.
And the time.
Even when you grow to a large size, it's still kind of the same. Maybe you can make it a bit more effective and efficient, but it's still a headcount you need to add, right? You need to add the headcounts for customers. Whereas with a product-led approach, if you fix a problem in the product and a process in the product, it works for all, right? Then you don't need to support them anymore on that. And that's like a one-time cost instead of a continuous cost.
Right.
So that's something to be aware about as well. The transition from sales-led to product-led is super hard. And I know a lot of businesses are looking at that now. They were already looking at that the last 2 years, but now with the current market conditions, where people are, there's a lot of people probably on the market, but it's also VCs are finally asking, do you need all these people in your company, or could you do work a bit smarter with your headcount, right?
Right.
So I think it's that drives a lot of focus on product growth. And this transition is a big change management exercise, basically, because you have a company that's thinking sales-led in everything they do. So they've been used to thinking, how do we solve this? We need to bring in a customer success manager to support the customer, to fully understand the product and onboard them explain everything, right? And then you go to a model where you basically are saying, we don't need a customer success manager at all. We just let them, do self-service, and then they can reach out if they need support, right? And that's a super big transition for a lot of people, both in sales and customer success and etc. So that can be scary for a lot of people. So it's really a change management exercise, and like any other change management exercises, it needs to come from the top management that you're doing this, why you're doing this. Like the CEO level need to do it. So that's I would say the most important thing is that it's aligned management communication that we're doing this, and this is why we're doing this, to explain the value and so on. And then from there, you drive it cross-functionally. It's a cross-functional initiative. It's not just one team, the product team, that needs to do this. It's, as I mentioned earlier, marketing, customer success, sales, all of those functions need to get involved.
The incentives, the package of sales that can be scary with this transition, how to address the fear of some key stakeholders. Yeah,
exactly. And then you need to drive that cross-functionally, basically, like that it happens and progresses and kind of moves on, right? I think we did a couple of great things in Cobalt when we did this transition. Number one was we did all that with the management, but we also mapped out the entire process we had today, like all the steps involved in our customer journey. And then we looked at what is actually high touch today or not self-service today, and what could we make self-service, what should we make self-service to have this kind of self-service journey, right? So that created a nice overview and plan and kind of goal to reach. The second great thing we did, and that's actually kudos to our customer success team, is they said, basically, we're going to cut customer success from our smallest customers. So they kind of decided this chicken and egg problem, where you either you wait for product to be fully ready, or you just say, okay, we're going to cut the people, so product better be ready, right? I think of course, it's not that harsh, but it's more like then we figure out with automation how we can handle it and so on, right? And then the third thing related to that is we reduced the scope. We focused on the smallest customers first. Instead of focusing on all customer segments, we focused on the ones with the easiest use case, the most likely, like the most transactional customers, really. So that also made a lot of sense.
And I assume this kind of process might take at least 3 to 4 quarters to start seeing a difference, kind of the cultural shift. It's changing some positions. Process. Exactly.
Especially when you are in a company with 100 plus people, it's from there, it's just a long process to do such a transition. So you have to be patient, but you should also try to push a bit more speed. And I think the best way of doing that is by looking at what are other businesses doing. If they can do it, so can we, right? Like, why shouldn't we be able to do what other businesses are doing, right? Drive the motivation and fear away by looking at what others are doing.
Right. And sometimes that helps a lot. And I like to use that is to invite people who did it successfully to share some experiences, to open just for an informal Q&A with the leadership team. I think that this kind of initiatives helps to kind of have this outside perspective and kind of, again, being able to go through the fear of change. And so maybe it is too early to do that change. Let's keep doing things as we have always been doing. That kind of mentality can come into the room, and it's very difficult to face that as the CEO or as co-founders, right?
Agree. Yeah.
Good point. And nowadays, I think that's something that comes to mind, and for the ones who are listening, which is also it's different what we are talking. So we know that especially second and third time founders talk a lot about this, which is we need to have more a go-to-market first mentality instead of a product first mentality. But here we are really talking about a go-to-market first mentality with a product orientation in that go-to-market mentality. But maybe you are able to express this or articulate this in a better way. Why, when we talk about product-led growth, we are not saying product first. We are really trying to help the customer first with the product, right?
That's a common. If we build it, they will come, right? That's the classic.
Exactly.
You still need. That's what people always said, and that's not what product-led growth is about. It's not about you just build something and then they come. You still need to market your product. You still need to, put it out on the right channels, whether that's SEO, SEM, content, G2, whatever channels you want to showcase your product. But it's just in the funnel of, you can say, acquiring, especially converting and retaining the customer. The product becomes the growth the driver, basically, right? Like you basically you try to remove the need to have people in that equation, but it doesn't mean that you should still think about having the customer in mind. Who's your end user? What's your messaging? All of that needs to be aligned. And the beautiful thing about when you do things product-led, it's a lot easier to be standardized, right? Because when you have people involved, one salesperson can explain the product in one way, another salesperson explains it in another way. They can over-promise and we can under-deliver. And over time, we always said, like, okay, we need to train our salespeople. That's why we did sales enablement, all these different things. But actually, when you do product-led growth, it's a lot easier to standardize the messaging, standardize the product experience and all these things, because it's a product, right? It's not a person communicating this. But it's still a lot of people typically who needs to align and build that product. So they then need to have that coherent messaging, coherent, user journey and these kind of things. And that can be a challenge as well.
Again, it's important to repeat this, right? It's not only the product team being alone building the product and expecting that everything will flow fantastically. It's still a lot of customer centricity, marketing playing the role. Even sales in a lot of organizations will need an important job. But of course, we don't need such a high or such a big sales team, and they will be much more strategic in their involvement with customers and less bureaucratic in the kind of tasks that they do. They can even add much more value to customers when they are speaking with customers instead of just doing basic stuff.
I've been a salesperson myself. The number one thing I hated most was just doing those generic cookie cut demos, right? Like the same demo, you do it every day, 10 times a day, right?
Repeating.
In product-led growth, you should really try to avoid those demos. Have a video demo or have a free trial showcase the product. And then the meetings that might happen are much more value driving, right? It's meetings where the customers or prospects can ask questions that are actually related to how they saw the product, specific use cases, things like that. So it's a much more value based conversation and much more interesting conversation. So salespeople really get a lot of benefit from this model as well. And there's this new concept called sales assist, where sales is basically like they're still part of the journey. They can be there to expand customers, to convert bigger customers. But it's a different kind of conversation you're having when people are already tried your product, basically.
And you talked about something very important there, which is the alpha of a product-led growth mentality in the scaling up stage, right? Because then at that stage, a lot of the revenue comes from the existing customer base. And it's kind of the same exercise. How are we able to create more value for our existing customers and make it easier for them to expand, to be able to extract more value from the product? And again, without salespeople doing basic stuff and repetitive stuff that could be automated and make it even easier for customers to decide when they want to expand and to the way they want, to the package that they want in a very easy way. So not only in the acquisition part, but in the retention part. And we know that's also one of the issues when we see those NRR or net revenue retention rates going down when they need to go up, because if we don't have an healthy metric there, again, more customers or more revenue will need to come from new customers, and especially after 10 million ARR or 20 or 50 million ARR, this becomes a huge growth plateau if we are not able to grow enough from existing customers. Right?
Agree. I think a popular thing that's increasing in popularity is usage-based pricing, which is very closely tied to product-led growth, where you basically tie your pricing to some kind of thing that relates to users getting value from your product, right? The more value they get, the more they have to pay, right? In the old days, it was very much like a seat model or something like that you would do. And it's not always seats relate to value. Sometimes they do. But it can be features. So you can kind of say you make a you find that kind of thing that users get value from. For instance, for Userflow, it's the amount of users you can serve with our onboarding content, right? So we charge based on that, like the monthly active users, because the more users you have that get onboarded with Userflow, the more value you get, right? And it's kind of those are the things. With Cobalt, it was how many pen tests are you doing, right? The more pen tests you do, the more value you get, right? So I think it's those kind of things that can also help and make it easier for salespeople as well to have the right conversation, because it's about then how can we expand that value, right? How can we expand that usage? And that's aligned with the usage-based pricing. So yeah.
So and let's jump into the different way of building a company from 0 to 1 in a bootstrapping fashion with very limited headcounts. Do you still think that now Userflow will go from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100? You will need to expand a lot the headcount. What are your plans for the future? What are your mindset? And after also the comparison with your experience with Cobalt, that you went through multiple investment rounds until Series B, right?
Yeah, no. So Userflow is a very fun journey. We don't have plans to increase headcount dramatically. We might increase it a bit, just to if we need to. So far, we haven't. We're still growing fast as any VC-backed company, but we haven't had the need to basically add headcount, and it's due to this highly product-led model. We have a great product, we have a lot of automation, and it's a product-led journey that we use. And for instance, with support, which could become a problem when you have 550 customers. We always solve that in the product, right? So if we have a recurring support issue, we fix it in the product, and then you don't have it anymore. So we spend up to 50% of our time fixing UX issues that we then no longer have to hear about. So yeah, so far so good. I'm excited to see how far we can go. I don't think it's actually unrealistic to go to like 5 million ARR. Or even beyond that with a team of just 3. But let's see.
Wow.
So that's a fun journey. With Cobalt, yes, we.
So you would get almost to the Series B milestone in, I would say, in the old SaaS napkin, to the kind of the 5 million ARR with just 3 people, kind of the same series that you raised that's Cobalt with, I imagine at the time with 100 plus people or so, right?
Yeah. I mean, that has also changed, and I think we're going to see Series B being a bit different. I think when I say Cobalt is a Series B company, we are what a Series B company would be 10 years ago, right? Like not the Series B companies we saw last year, where they have like 2 million in ARR and then they are suddenly a unicorn. Like that was just ridiculous, right? Point. There's a big reason for why we're in the situation we're in today. It was too much. It wasn't realistic investments, and I don't know. It was just like shooting. Let's see what we can hit. Let's hope we hit the next Facebook, and then it's all good, right? I think that's great for the VCs that have a lot of money. For the founders who are raising those kind of big rounds, there's a big risk of down rounds now. which is not fun. That puts a lot of pressure on the founders, which I don't think they thought about when they did those big rounds back
go
last
through the
year.
layoffs, and which is always super
that's
difficult
not so fun
for the ones who are laid off and for the ones who need to do the layoff, right?
Exactly. But so yeah, I think we can go pretty far with this model. I think we're also an outlier. What we're doing is special. I don't think
can be
all
applied
companies should do that. But I think you should think about how big your team needs to be. I want to see more. I'm very inspired by Basecamp, David Heinemeier, and the team there, which basically built a profitable. They're around 50. They built a profitable, highly successful business. Only raised, I think, some angel money from Jeff Bezos in a funny story there back then. But yeah, I think that's the only thing, that those kind of companies, I would love to see more of those in the future. And I think Userflow that's the mindset we have. But yeah, I have nothing against the VC journey as such. It's just a journey that you have to be very conscious about going on, right? With Cobalt, it was our first company, and that was the only model we knew. Like, you build a startup, then you go raise capital. We didn't have any network, so I think we needed that as well. We needed to get the network, raise the capital, build, have the money to survive, right? So for us, it made sense, but it also put us on a journey towards going public, right? And that was more or less the only journey you then go towards. And that's how VC money has been for the last many years. It's like you invest in companies with the aim of them going public or doing some kind of huge acquisition, right? And reality is that almost very few companies actually end up doing that, right? So there's a lot more companies that go under or get acquired at a lower amount. But you still built your company in a way that was set up for that only goal, right? So I think that should change. You should look at, okay, what kind of company do I want to build? Do I want to build a big unicorn that needs to go public? Sure, then go on the VC wagon, do that stuff there, and that's aligned with their goals, right? But if you are looking to just build a profitable business where you can be in power of your own kind of decisions, your own success, what your company should look like, and you could be satisfied, let's say, with maybe having just a good salary by having a very profitable business, or maybe getting acquired at a lower amount because you don't have a lot of stakeholders to make that decision, right? Then you maybe shouldn't raise from venture capital funds. Maybe you can raise still from angels or something like that. But I think that decision was never there in the past, which is interesting. It was always either or, right? It was like, it was either I raise capital, or if I can't raise capital, it's because my business is bad and I need to close it down and do something else, right? So I think I think what we are advocates for is there are actually another path, and the bootstrapper path and the path of profitability instead of just growth for the sake of growth.
I'm kind of observing some trends here. So the first one is that we are seeing more second and third time founders who might not have been very successfully exiting the previous business, but they already have some pocket money that allow them to be a little bit more mid-term, long-term oriented and less survival mode, as typically the majority of the founders has been until now. Is I don't have money in the bank, and I need to struggle, and I need to sleep in the office until I'm able to save all pennies to invest in the product. I would say that is one. Second, founders that have that opportunity don't want to have the pressure from the VC world, especially when they are trying to prove product market fit. So they want to have the foundation right before they start scaling up, and then they want to deploy capital and go the VC path, and still have the decision: is this a business that is VC backable or non-VC backable? And we only know that after product market fit, right? Are we able to grow this quickly or not? More money will allow us to grow faster, yes or no? I think that there are so many pieces that we need to understand and put together when we are in the pre-seed and seed stage, getting into product market fit, hopefully at Series A. But as you said, nowadays it seems that product market fit is much more at Series B or Series C. But things are changing, so it's cool to see this new trends, man.
Yeah, no, I think how can I put it? It's not Userflow is actually, I think, would be a fantastic VC case. We could probably become a unicorn and do all those things, right? It's just that's not the path that my co-founder and I want to go on. We want to have a profitable business. Yeah. We want to not just hire, grow, you know, this kind of stuff. And because that's a very long journey. It's not like an overnight journey for you to succeed with that. It's a 10-year plus journey to build a unicorn, right? Cobalt is getting closer, but we've been around for 10 years, right? So it's a long journey. Whereas you can build a highly successful, profitable SaaS business in, I would say, less than 5 years, right? That can be good for you and as a founder and your employees. But it's not a, you know, then you didn't select that VC case, right? So that's important. The other thing I want to highlight, I think it's super important what you said about product market fit. I think, and even in Cobalt, even though we went on a VC-backed journey, we were lucky in the sense that we didn't raise one of those big rounds because they also existed back then. You did see Sequoia and Andreessen doing these like 20 million rounds in some kind of unproven company. Right. We were doing what was called bug bounty programs in the beginning, and we couldn't raise money, but a lot of our competitors has raised like huge rounds, right? And we were like, okay, does that mean we are not going to win in this market? But then we realized over time that people were not buying the bug bounty, not because of the other players, but because it wasn't a need to have. It wasn't something, there wasn't a product market fit, basically. And then we actually changed our model to be pen testing, which is a more like control test and structure that you can use for sales process and so on. And that just changed everything. Suddenly we had product market fit, no matter how many competitors there were in the market. We had the product market fit. We were growing fast. And because we hadn't raised that big round, we didn't have to convince any investors why we were pivoting, why we were changing our model. Yeah. Because we hadn't sold a story about this bug bounty being amazing. We had just raised a bit of money, and then when we had the pen test model, had the product market fit, then we could go out and raise more capital because now we actually knew this is a model that can scale, right? So I think that's another big thing for companies to think about. Be a bit aware about what story you're selling and how much money you're raising before you actually know if you're product market fit, because VCs are gonna expect returns, they're gonna expect growth, they're gonna, you know, their business, expect a lot of different things. And if you cannot live up to that, that's gonna be tough on your business, right? So
absolutely. You don't need only to kind of calibrate the direction of the team, but also of the stakeholders and the investors at the same time. Again, the change management exercise that we were talking about before in moving from sales-led growth into product-led growth is not easy just with the team. Imagine having the team and the investors to pivot your strategic direction for the company. Awesome. Exactly. Esben, let's go into the last segment of the show where I ask you a quick question. You give me a brief answer. And I know that you are very diligent with that, given your roots. And I saw you in some of the open questions that I asked you before. So let's go into the first one. If you would have the opportunity to have a coffee with your younger self, and you can decide at the beginning of Cobalt or Userflow, what advice would you offer to your younger Esben?
I think when I was younger, I actually built websites and all sorts of stuff. And then I went on the university path, which is very classical in Denmark. You go on this, like you go into high school, you go to university, you go get a job at a consultancy. I wish I could have, because I read a lot about Skype back then and so on. I wish I would have been more kind of exposed to this startup culture earlier, so I could have done some kind of startups. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't have gone to university, but it could have meant that I could have been exposed to the startup world a bit earlier. So that's something I hope to instill in my own kids someday, and you know, like expose them a bit to this possibility of doing startups, that's an actual career journey that you can go on.
Take more risks early on, and that's something that I would also tell to my younger self. And what are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
Oh, I'm proud of a lot of things. I mean, I am proud of being part of building a company that's today is 300 people, right? That's pretty amazing. It's a successful company, so that's one of the big parts. But I'm also proud of what we're doing right now. I think it's insane that we can scale to millions in ARR with a team of just 3 people. So I'm proud of both journeys. It's been very different journeys, but I'm very proud of both. Yeah.
Worst advice ever received?
Oh man. Actually, I don't know. I tend to not listen to that kind of stuff.
You filter them out, so you don't remember.
I don't know. Yeah, no, I haven't. Oh, sorry. Siri jumped in here. We had to cut that out. No, so yeah, no, I don't know if I ever received any very bad advice. I've always been kind of positive around listening to what people say, and then I take in what I want and don't take in what I don't want.
Right. Awesome. And so now let's go into the resources. Your favorite book, business or non-business?
Yeah, no, so the book I always like to recommend is Wes Bush has written this book on product-led growth that I think everybody should read in software as a service. It's a very great book. They also have a community where you can learn a lot about product-led growth. So yeah, highly recommend that one. Yeah.
Great resource after our discussion today to go learn more about what we have discussed today. Favorite movie or series?
Oh man, I watch so much so many shows. My latest favorite is Succession, probably. I really like that one until they reached season 4, I think it was, that turned really bad. But that's a great show. I highly recommend that. There's also a new show on HBO called The Peripheral that I also like. I like those kind of shows similar to like Black Mirror, where it's like dystopia future. Those are great.
Right. And finally, your favorite podcast, excluding this one?
Yeah, of course, this one, right? But yeah, no. I think my favorite podcast is How I Built This with Guy Raz. I think it's just amazing, inspirational stories that everybody can learn from. They're much more like focused SaaS podcasts and so on. But that one, I think the power of that podcast is that you don't need to be a startup founder or anybody. You can be anyone and listen to that podcast and get inspired. So I think that's a great podcast.
And it kind of connects you with your first advice to your younger self. So yeah, Esben, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure, and congrats for the amazing work that you have been doing.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And to our community, thanks for being there. We keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life easier, from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. See you soon, and keep scaling.